Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this meeting of the Council of the Town of Oakville. I invite you to rise and join Council in O Canada. Thank you. Please be seated. I will now give our opening prayer, followed by a moment of silent reflection, and we will begin our meeting proper. God grant us understanding and patience, that justice, truth, and honesty may be evident in our decisions. Make us mindful of the needs of the people throughout the town of Oakville. Help us govern with the wider community in mind, and so create in us a desire for progress and responsible action. We ask this in your name. Amen. Thank you, everyone. I see we have no regrets tonight. Do we have any declarations of pecuniary interest? Thank you. Council, you have before you the minutes of the previous meetings of Council on March 25th and April 8th. I need a motion from Councillor Khan to approve, and seconder, Councillor Knoll. Thank you. Any changes? All in favor? Opposed, if any? The minutes are adopted. We have no public presentations on this agenda, and we have no listed delegations, but we do have a standing committee report from the Administrative Services Committee meeting of April 9th. Councillor Khan and Councillor Dudek move and second adoption. All in favor? Opposed, if any? The report is adopted. We have no consent items on this agenda, but we do have a discussion item, and that is item number 1, the Oakville Hydro shareholder approval of director remuneration. And we have with us here tonight the chair of Oakville Hydro Corporation, Mr. Gary Burkett. If you have questions, Council, what is your pleasure? Councillor Elger.
I'll move it.
Councillor Elger moves it. Councillor Knoll seconds it. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed, if any? Thank you. That carries. That brings us to item number 2, which is the discussion item for the 2012 Employee Engagement Survey. And Council, this is an outstanding report, and I know that the CAO is looking forward with some pride as well as happiness to give you his synopsis. Mr. Green.
Thank you very much, Mayor Burton. This is in fact our third employee engagement survey that's been carried out by Metrics at Work since 2007, and as you have suggested, it's with a great deal of pride in terms of our employees, both their participation rate and how they embrace service at the town of Oakville. In fact, in 3 weeks' time, you'll be seeing the Polera public survey, and what you will see is evidence based on our employee engagement survey that engaged employees drive great service, and you'll see that in the upcoming Polera results. Metrics at Work is the company that has undertaken the 3 surveys for us. They have a very large database of both public sector and private sector companies that they do work for. In our survey, you'll hear that they have 29 engagement drivers, which are common to all of their surveys, and which we were scored against and ranked against comparators, both public and private sector. We have 6 particular drivers that are unique to ourselves that we are tracking so that we can produce our own benchmarks. And I think without further ado, it's probably best that I get Dr. John Yardley up and ask that he move forward with our presentation. I thought you were on my left, but you're on my right.
There we go.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Your Worship, Mayor, councillors, senior team leaders of the town of Oakville, and honoured guests who are sitting in the benches with me. It's my pleasure to present the results to you of the survey. As soon as we get it up on our screen. And having watched how quickly you ripped through the first part of the agenda, let me try to do the same with regard to the results. Not to obfuscate anything or to remove anything from the presentation, but they are an excellent and superior set of results. And so let me, without any further ado, get through it. Now, the first thing is a series of items here. I don't intend to read these to you. You can read them yourself, but the most important part is in blue. And that if you're going to carry out surveys, and the reason for why the city has done this is, the town has done this is quite clear in terms of its link to citizen service and the outcomes that are associated with good service. But there's also another side, and that's the staff side, and knowing and understanding how your frontline staff feel is an important way of capturing information through surveys, and so that has been done here on a regular basis. It helps you hear their voice. You hear voices raised by taxpayers. You also probably hear voices from staff, but not knowing whether that anecdotal evidence is backed up by a large majority or a small minority of people, the survey can give you some sense and understanding of just what the staff feel like and how they feel. So this is an opportunity for them to voice their opinions. And the second or third thing is that it gives then an opportunity for senior management as well as the OD, which is the organizational development staff, to know and understand where there might be strengths that they can learn from. In other words, there might be better practices, and at the same time learn where there might be some challenges in the organization, and that can provide an opportunity for intervention. And the last point, and it's the point associated with the service idea, is that if you have a great town in terms of staff and how they feel, it creates what we would call a magnet community or a magnet organization. And the notion of a magnet is that it attracts and it retains talent. And to the degree that you want your town services to be provided by talented people, the higher your scores are with regard to the types of things that are in the survey, the stronger they are as an attractive force for people when you have turnover, and at the same time as you grow your staff complement. It does, of course, as Ray has mentioned, there's quite a bit of academic work that has demonstrated that a engaged staff does lead to better results with regard to how the customers or the consumers of your services feel, and that's the citizens of Oakville. Having said that, there's a model of the diagram. I'll just run the mouse, if I can, over it. The important thing to understand here is that if we measure a number of drivers in the workplace, and they're about the job, about the local work environment, and about the organization, this helps us understand what might drive how they feel about their job and the local work environment, in other words, job engagement, and how they feel about organizational engagement. This is the domain of the survey here in blue and green. The things that you're interested in, of course, and most particularly the client or citizen side, is not measured in the survey, but you do have a companion survey that does that. And there are other elements inside the organization that contain information such as absenteeism, grievances, turnover, etc. And those are the things that we would argue that the more engaged an employee is, and if I can get that arrow to come back on the screen, and I can't, the more engaged people are, the more likely that you are going to have positive staff outcomes and lower negative outcomes. Having said that, I want to make one point clear with regard to the numbers that you see in your reports and in this presentation, and that is the fact that percentages are a score out of 100. They're not the percent who are satisfied.
So you can see that there's a Likert scale there. If everybody strongly disagreed, you'd get a very low score, you'd get a 0. If everybody strongly agreed, you'd get a high score, 100%. You clearly don't get that. You get a range of opinions, and the mean, or the average, is the collation of everybody's response, not just the top responses. So it's not the strongly agrees and the agrees, it's the entire range of opinion from staff on the various elements that are measured, and therefore is a true average. You'll notice that we've got there that it's rare to score in the very high and very low areas. It's also relatively rare to score in the 80s. What you tend to see is high 70s down into the 60s as a so-called normal range. And the important thing to recognize here is that's an absolute value. So you can see its score out of 100, but what's really important and what I will present today is what you look like on a relative basis. What do you look like relative to other municipalities? What do you look like relative to the database? And that relative information is very important, including, of course, how you look relative to 2010, the previous survey. This is what was in the survey. This is in your handout, so I'll just move straight over it, but there's a large number of drivers there. I'm going to put all of them together in one measure at one stage to show you what the so-called grand driver looks like. It's a very simple way of understanding the entire complement of the scores that are in the engagement drivers. You can see here the response rate. It's incredibly high, and it's something to be very, very proud of. As you see over here, there are 3 that score exceptionally high, 1 a little lower. This is the most dispersed group that you have, geographically dispersed. People who work in outside areas and people who work on shift work. And that 66.4 is as high as we get on average in our database, so your folks here have done very, very well in terms of their response. It's a slight improvement over the past. And it's a very excellent result when you look at the total response rate here at 78.1. So it does give you great confidence in the results, and also shows you that your employees are basically encultured with the idea of filling out a survey and providing you with feedback, as well as staff with feedback. So let me move forward beyond that and say that what I'm going to look at now is the single composite score. So if you were to walk away with a single image in your mind, this might be it. And you notice that the average doesn't start here at 0, so there's a distortion in the graph. It's not because I'm selling you finance like mutual fund advisors. It's because I've got a series of bars that are going to come up on the graph in a moment. And in order to separate those bars, you need to start at a non-zero origin. So you can see there that there's the city or region average with regard to all of those drivers that are common in the other surveys that we've done and the survey that we've done at the town of Oakville. And very clearly the blue line is above the orange line. So you can see that the town as a whole has scored higher than the city or region average. And there's about 25 in there. You can see now why I had to distort the zero origin, because the database average is very close to the city region average as well. And so clearly there you exceed the average. When you have a look at the very best, you almost are at the best score that we've ever received for this composite measure of all of those drivers. And so you can see that from the point of view of where you would rank on a relative basis, it's very high in our database. But the database itself, and this is about 160 organizations you're being compared to here, you can see is a little bit distant. So if you want, from the point of view of a goal or an outstanding result, you have a wee way to go. But the reality is, from a public service point of view, and particularly with municipalities, Oakville has scored highly. Now that's just a great big measure, the composite score. There's some notes there that I won't go into because I've already mentioned them. That gives you an idea of the whole of all of the drivers, but it of course hides the variation of the various elements within. So we'll step into that and have a look at that now. So here's 2012 results relative to 2010. So we're not looking just at the absolute score now, we're looking at it on a relative basis. The blue bar, wherever it is higher, is an indication that you've got a higher result than the red, and you can see that there's very, very minor differences here in terms of where you are. But in the vast majority of the results, the Oakville results for 2012 are higher than those for 2010. They're ordered, by the way, by the 2012 results. So we'll show you, I believe it's the next slide where we show you the different scores. So if I can move that slide forward, this is now taking those data that I just showed you, recasting it and showing it by the highest positive difference to the largest negative difference. So it's exactly the same data but reordered. Instead of from the 2012 highest result to the lowest 2012 result, this is a comparative slide. And you can see right across the top here is the different scores. Where it moves away and you can't see it is because it's too thin, but if the 0 is above, it's a positive result. but it's about 0.1 or 0.2. So you can see there's a lot that are very similar, but there's a larger number up here a large number up here that are quite strong, but not hugely strong relative to your previous results. You previously did very well. So to expect this organization to do large incremental changes is probably a little unfair. You can see, however, there are some that have gone down very marginally and a few more by -1%. These are rounded scores. So here's the reasons for the scores underneath that give you a sense of what you've scored relatively higher on versus those that you've scored relatively lower on. I apologize, I can't get this mouse to constantly stay on, and I can't get it to click. There it is, it's back there now. So, and it's not moving very well for me, so let me stop and just say when you start on the left-hand side, you see the largest positive differences for pay satisfaction. Workload is a measure of the ability to manage workload, and you can see there's been a slight improvement in the ability to manage workload. Employee involvement is up a little from the previous result, and if you go over to the far right-hand side, you'll see the areas where there's been a slight decrement, but very, very slight on a relative basis. So moving beyond that now to look at the next slide, you'll see that we're going to get into, is it on?
That's on. If it goes off, just hit that.
Okay, thank you. So what I'm going to show you now is the variation that sits in behind these averages. If you wanted to know and understand statistics, would say you need to understand two things: a measure of central tendency balance, which is an average, and you need to understand the distribution of responses that provides that. The statisticians use something called a standard deviation. We don't get into that because it's something that's lost in the mists of time for most of us. So we use what is called frequency distributions, and it shows you the proportion of people who scored under each of the Likert scale values. Over here, strongly agree down to strongly disagree. So when you have a look at customer service, which was the highest ranked driver that you had for 2012, at 84.1, you can see now that the distribution of scores shows you or helps you understand how you score so highly in that, and in a moment I'll show you co-worker interactions. So you can see 39% of staff said strongly agree to the series of items with regard to their ability to provide good customer service. For another 43% said agree, and there's the thin tail that runs off to the left. Co-worker interaction, you can see, is very, very similar in terms of the way that you've got this big bulge to the right running off to a thin tail to the left. So if you hear, for instance, people saying things about their inability to provide good customer service, you're hearing from a very small group of people in reality, because this is nearly 80% of your staff responding to the survey, but only 1% of those who responded saying strongly disagree, only 2% saying disagree. You can see here the vast majority of staff feel that they're providing excellent service. Of course, it's them saying about the service that they're able to provide. You'll have to wait until the next presentation to see what your citizens say, but I understand from what Ray has just said that you can be justifiably proud of those results too. So what does it look like when you score in the lower scores of 54 and 53? As you can see here, team recognition and reward is 54.7, and that's what the distribution of scores looks like. See, that whole bulge here is flattened and moved to the left and thickened the left tail. Now the issue here is if that thickening of the tail is in one department or a division within a department, and forgive me, can't remember which way around it goes at the town of Oakville, because every municipality has it different in terms of whether it's department then division or division then department. But in your lower units, if it's concentrated there, that's where you've got issues that need to be addressed. It's not really at the town of Oakville, it's groups within where you may have a concentration of people who are strongly disagreeing about the elements that have been measured in the survey. And you can see here, there's the possibility for that because you've got a thickening of the tail. There's what it looks like for opportunities for advancement. Still very positive up here, and a fair proportion of people sitting in the neutral zone, which is in the middle. I'm not going to go into speak to that other than to say that these distributions are quite valuable when you get into small groups, which is what has been done by the town. They've ordered reports that have been pressed right to the front line so that managers and supervisors can take their own results that they can own with their staff and look at those on a relative basis. Of course, you're looking at the corporate results, which is the entire distribution based on the large number of respondents. Thank you. So this is now looking at Oakville drivers versus other municipalities. The number of municipalities to which you're being compared varies depending on the construct that's in their surveys versus those that are in yours. But first of all, you can see there very clearly you've got a statement that gives you an indication of what you look like. You're higher on 14, sorry, you're superior on 13, which is the green, which is more than 5% higher. This here is just rounded up, so that's why it stays at gray, so it's probably 4.9. The overall result is 4.8% relative speaking, so if you take all of these measures together, you're nearly 5% higher than the sector database average. And you can see that you're vastly superior on these ones, you're superior on those ones, and there's only one that you're equal on. So amongst all of those drivers, your staff are reporting more positively than the database average on all of those, just about all of those drivers, which is a tremendous result, a really superior result. That's what it looks like when you look at each individual driver with Oakville in blue, the sector in red. You can see the very clear differences that I'm showing here with the arrow, and they are represented by the numbers above. You can see the types of drivers that you're superior on, quite a large number of different types of elements, all of which go to contribute for a positive work environment on average across your entire town. Of course, it's different when you get into the reeds or the weeds, because every smaller group, of course, can vary compared to the town as a whole, but that's a really strong set of results there. So just very quickly to see what that looks like by commissions, and I apologize again, I should have had this in my mind. I've actually come from a region this morning, and in my head I've got whether they are commissions or departments or divisions. This is your CAO's office, and you're looking at the same way of showing the results, which is by different scores across the top. You can see the pattern is very similar to what you see for the town as a whole. So this group, and help me just for a moment, it is commission, is it? Yes, so this commission equivalent looks like the town as a whole. And so you can see a large number of positive differences relative to 2010, a few that are not as large, and a very few that are slightly lower. So the trend is very similar. These are the elements that go to make up those different scores. You can see here job engagement, satisfaction with senior management, interdepartmental cooperation, very high scores on a relative basis compared to 2010. And here are the ones that are lower at the bottom right hand of that particular graph. Now, there's a lot of information here, just alone across the top there. There's 20-odd different data points. You're looking at two different bars there as well. In the name of being able to get through all of the slide deck, I won't stop here. I'll move to show you each commission in order in the same way. So here's Community Services versus 2010, ordered by their change scores again. You can see the pattern is very similar, not as many greens, but still a lot of positive, a little bit of negative, and one that's quite large on this end down here, which is benefit satisfaction. There's the array of drivers and what they've scored highly on, and you can see the difference between the blue and the red bar demonstrating the difference in the overall average being over here on the left-hand side. So that's what the distribution looks like on a relative basis for community services versus 2010. The next commission up is corporate service drivers versus to 2010. So you can see here, again, the trend is the same. A lot of improvements, a couple of large ones, a lot of small ones, and very little decrement, and only on 4. And these are the drivers that constitute those that they're slightly lower on through to those that you're scored very high. Over here, of course, is the overall. I forgot to mention that before. Each time it shows the overall grand average, which is all of these drivers averaged together, and therefore the overall change for corporate services is around about 2%. It's rounded. Is that me? Time for me to get off? No, I'm sorry. Community development drivers versus 2010. So this is your next commission. Something I need to say, and which I'm sure you're aware, is that there was a reorg for the town from 2010 to 2012. It was all taken into account. So groups that moved, we moved them over as if they were there in 2010, so that you're looking at not apples to apples, because these people moved and there'd be different supervisors and under a different set of processes, but we moved with their scores so that we could look at them in 2012 on a relative basis. So here's community development. You can see very strong positive results here. These are eminently higher than the others, so you can see this is a commission that's done particularly well in terms of change scores, running from plus 16 all the way down here. You can see a large number of positive improvements, a lot more as well, with none in the negative. I mean, this is a great result in terms of what that commission looks like. But it's in a town that's improved and also with commissions that have also done well. It's just that this is an outstanding result on a comparative basis. So you can see here the huge improvements that have been gained in relative elements. As I move across here, there's the labels underneath, and you can see here the ones that have not changed much on a relative basis. Having said that, there's some measures that were in the survey with regard to positive behaviors. You can see them here in terms of co-workers, so the people who gave these positive behaviors, positive two-way communication, whoopsie, I don't know what happened there. Let me see if I can get it to go back. Receiving a please and thank you and being dealt with honesty, integrity, and with respect. This is co-workers to being reported by the people in the survey. Here's exactly the same items, but now it is being given by, I'm sorry, I'm having a little bit of trouble here getting the mouse to work for me. I think he went to sleep again, or she went to sleep again. In the middle, in the blue, and in the orange, you can see from customers and clients. Very strong set of results in terms of the giving of positive behaviors, more so laterally by co-workers, fairly strong by managers, but you can see each of the blue bars is slightly lower, so therefore a little less positive in terms of giving of those various positive elements that you'd expect in a good workplace, and then lower again for citizens. Now, there's a flip side to this that's not measured in your survey, which is harassment in the workplace, and it works exactly the same way that those who tend to do the greatest amount of harassment in workplaces are externals, your citizens. And then that's followed by co-workers, and then followed by management. And so we often hear the bully boss, and in fact, The Devil Wears Prada was a film that was basically dedicated to it, and yet it's more often perpetrated by people outside of the organization. Patients in hospitals, family members of patients in hospitals, students in schools are the greatest perpetrators of harassing types of behavior, not the stuff that you read in the newspapers about the bully boss at all. So having said that, this is the positive side of that, so it's a very good set of scores that you see there. Just to provide a little bit of feedback with regard to how well or not so well that the organization is doing with regard to following up on the survey, you can see there that there are 4 items that we ask. We ask this in any repeat survey. So at the bottom you can see how important employees feel that this engagement survey is, starting from the right-hand end, strongly agree, down to strongly disagree. You can see that the 3 gray bars are incredibly small, so they see this as an important part of improvement inside the town. You can see there, in terms of the effectiveness of previous communications, very strong with very small, again, on the gray bars at the end. When you look at the actions that were taken with regard to the results, the gray bars are expanding, as one would expect, because it's getting more and more difficult in terms of doing well. You can see, though, still that the blue bars represent a very strong proportion of people, and if you add in the middle, that's a very large group of your folks. This is the tough one, 35D, we call it the traction item. The strongest result that we have in our database for an organization scored on this was 66% just recently set by an organization that we measured in. This is what your results look like for the town of Oakville, and if I bring these up now, you'll see that you scored on average 54. So you can see that this town can do better with regard to using these results in particular to improve the quality of work life. But keep in mind, your town is already doing very well. So to get change will be very difficult on a relative basis compared to those who have poorer results. And so I wouldn't suggest that this is a problem, but it is an area where the town could potentially put in a little bit more effort, because they're excellent in terms of their overall results. Maybe they can strive a little bit harder, and so this is putting the feet of senior management to the fire. Can they push these results through to the front line and particularly have an effect where it's needed, which is those parts of the organization that aren't doing as well. But very, very strong results. As you can see here, the average is 69, 69, and I apologize for this mouse, it doesn't want to do what I want it to do, as 60% and 54, with a top box score in there as well. So next steps, this is a very simple slide. It's a compilation of what we would normally put in 3 or 4 slides for what it is that an organization should do. This is, I think, for me, about the 3rd or 4th time that I've presented, so senior team, to each of the commissions, to your managers and supervisors. They have also received a newsletter, and now we're doing the council in terms of a quick overview. So this process is almost completed in terms of at least my input into it. So it's very much underway, and again, I apologize, my mouse has gone to sleep again. There's a need for learning what you're doing right, not you personally, but for senior management to ask and inquire to find out what it is that they're doing right that's causing these high scores, and to also look to see where they can improve, which will be in focused interventions in certain areas where they're not doing so well. That action planning has already been set out in terms of a set of processes. Your organizational development folks inside the organization have one of the better manager toolkits that have been pushed and taken to the front line. So every manager and supervisor has received these and is working with their directors, etc., inside their departments in order to effect change. And so those who have done very well would be expected to continue to do the excellent job that they are, not to do nothing, but to continue to do what they're doing. Those in the middle need to move up a little bit, and those that are struggling need support and help in terms of going forward, and that's what your OD folks do. That's also what your managers and directors do to support those in the front line. Those, of course, are the action plans that need to take place, but that now requires an accountability framework, and that's what this is all about. You have an excellent process already in place inside the town of Oakville for this to fall into place in, and so that's the way in which it's going to be fed back to senior management so that they know and understand what's being done and can look to see if there's any opportunities for synergy, etc., inside the town. And as has already been pointed out by Ray, the process of being able to continue this is, I think, an important thing, and I'm not just selling my services as a surveyor. It's the fact that this is an important way for the voices of your staff to be heard in a way that's recognized from the point of view of applied research. You can see the tremendous response rate that you're getting. If people are honest in terms of the way that they respond to the survey, you're getting good, excellent information in terms of how the town folk feel about, not the town folk, sorry, your town staff feel about their workplace. And as I've already pointed out, they've got very strong positive feelings to a large degree and some good improvements over 2010. That finishes my presentation.
Well, thank you very much for that very informative report. Questions? Councillor Lapworth, everybody right along here. We'll start with Councillor Lapworth and we'll pick our way down.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much for the statistics. Could you go back to, I think it's slide number 2 or number 3, where it showed the number of responses and the number of staff members that were available?
Oh, sorry.
I think that was the one.
Yeah.
No, before that.
Sorry. Let me go back.
Yeah, that's the one, yeah.
Sorry?
That's the one.
Yes.
Okay, now community services, roughly 2/3 participated, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Do you have any guidance for our staff to increase that response level?
Well, I wouldn't know until we burrow down into community services to know which groups within that commission had a lower response rate than the average, and that's likely those units that are the most distant, either psychologically or geographically, from the town centre. So knowing where that is and looking at those response rates, you then need to investigate to find out if there's anything systematic that's causing that lower response rate. Is it, for instance, lack of communication? Is it a lack of interest? Is it because managers there are less interested, less championing the process? And that would be an internal inquiry that would need to take place. I don't have that information here, but that would be the type of thing that I would ask if I was in charge of the town as to why it is where it is. But I also would caution you, this equivalent group in all of the municipalities is the one that struggles to get the highest response rate, and this is very good for that group. It contains transit, it contains fire, 2 groups that in particular have very low response rates, and some towns as low as 15 to 20%. So that drags down that commission. It's a tough group, tough nut to crack.
Thank you very much.
Let's see. Councillor Khan.
Thank you very much for your report. I just want to follow up with what Councillor Leopard was saying. The group that does not respond, you typically, when you're dealing with statistics, you kind of profile a demographics. Can you make a point about people that don't respond? Are they usually distance, or do they have a negative attitude towards these types of surveys, or do they have a neutral attitude?
Yeah. It's a good question. It's one that's really an academic question, because you have to be able to follow up in some way to know and understand who it was who didn't respond. That requires an awful lot of investigation, and we tend not to do it, especially in a town that scores highly. To answer more directly your question, I would suggest to you that it's usually people who are in some way negative about the town. They are probably lower, but I can't guarantee it unless you were to do some follow-up investigation. We're sometimes surprised as to who it is who doesn't respond. It's pretty good around here. I don't need to respond because we're getting good results anyway. Might be also a reasonable hypothesis, and so you might find that that's the case in certain areas. But I would suggest that those who tend not to respond are those who don't trust the survey process, don't trust management in some way, are cynical, or feel like something hasn't happened as a result of their voice in the past, and therefore tend to be more negative. If I was to generalize, that's what the generalization that I would make.
And then that brings me to my follow-up. You said that they typically don't trust a survey. What can you tell me about the integrity of the survey, the confidentiality aspect of the survey?
Well, first of all, it's an anonymous survey. So there's no way that in this particular location that we are able to trace back to find who it was who responded to a survey. We almost always find in organizations there's a group of people who won't respond to the survey. It's very, very rare to see 100% compliance. Your town does way above the municipal average, so you've got less of that as an issue here. And I'm losing my track here. Sorry, can you repeat that question?
I guess I just wanted to know about the process, whether it's whether it's done electronically, whether it's
Right.
a paper. Do they hand it up to their superiors? How is that done?
Yeah, my apologies. Most of it's by web, but there is a certain proportion that are paper, and I can't tell you off the top of my head about 250 receive paper surveys. Those paper surveys are also anonymous. When they fill them out, they can put them into an envelope that they can seal. That sealed envelope comes back to us where we unseal it. There's no way of us tracking who that person is and who received it. And the same from the web responses. That's not the case always. And when we do a survey that is not anonymous, we say so on the front of the survey. So this is 100% anonymous.
Lastly, are the drivers in any way prioritized, or are they all given equal weight?
They're given equal weighting in the way that we compute the means and the way that we put them together. There is a methodology that you can employ, and it's where you ask them how important this particular element is. And so we do have that in our surveys. Off the top of my head, I can't remember if we did it in this. I didn't report on it, and part of the reason why is because we don't measure things that are unimportant. And so what we tend to find is very high importance scores. You can do a gap analysis on that. It's somewhat problematic because it's like comparing inches to centigrade, two different units, and you're not supposed to do it. You're meant to array them in a graph. And then that graph has to be distorted because you have such a high, not response, but a high value that's placed on the importance. And in order to be able to see differences, you have to pull it down and distort the results. We tend not to do it. We used to do it all the time. So it's one of those things that we've moved away from. But you can measure how important they are. Most of these score critically in the very important range. It goes critically important, very important, important. The vast majority, on average, amongst all of the employees who would respond to the survey would say it's very important. And so there's not a lot of difference in the for want of a better way of describing it, how you could weight it using that type of information.
But we did actually question the importance in the survey.
Right.
Thank you, Councillor. Anyone else over here? Councillor Adams and then Councillor Elger.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Would you mind going, I think it was slide 3 where you compared Oakville to database averages, or maybe it was slide 4 or 5 there.
It must be in this direction.
That
Is this
would be the one. That's it. So you have a database average, and you have database best, and then you've got municipal best and municipal average, I'll call it. And I'll note that the database averages are higher than the municipal, and in particular your best of class are way, relatively speaking, way higher, but neither of those are the municipal ones. So it appears to me that for some reason, the public sector numbers are lower than what I presume must be the private sector?
Yeah, I can tell you that the problem is more specific than that. You'll notice that it says the database best there is for any organization of 100 employees and greater. So an organization of 120 that's tight scores like that. So that's the problem that you've got looking at the database. You have to cut it off at some point.
So there's a size matter. So
Size
somebody who's
very
1,000
much matters.
employees versus one that's 100 and a bit.
Correct.
Is going to be way different.
Yes.
And so that may explain the database best being significantly higher, is that it could be I'll call it a medium-sized company.
No, I'm sorry, I didn't hear that last statement.
So that the highest numbers in your database may be medium-sized companies of 100 to 200.
Yeah, and I would call that a very small company on a relative basis in our database. So, for instance, we have organizations in there of 12,000 employees. So 100 would be considered to be relatively small from an enterprise point of view.
So from your database perspective, that would be tiny.
Yes.
Even though, really small companies
Correct.
in the 5 to 10 employee range
Metrics
would
at
never do
work.
this kind of
Yes.
survey. But so do you have an ability to tell us what private sector numbers would look like on average for a similar sized organization?
It would be a gross generalization because it would depend, and it depends on so many different factors. But I would suggest to you that we don't see in our database of the private organizations, which is about 30% of those that we survey, we don't see huge differences between private sector and the public sector on many of these elements. And I wouldn't say on all elements, but on many of these elements. And I would suggest to you that there's a reason why. And that is the fact that it doesn't matter where you work, it doesn't matter how old you are, it doesn't matter whether you're male or female, the principles by which you wish to be managed are very much the same. And if I could boil it down to 3 simple things, it would be trust, respect, and fairness. And so if you get respect and fairness in the workplace, you get trust, and that creates highly engaged employees. That's a very simplistic response to you. There are things where you've got lots of, for instance, discretionary dollars, but I can tell you now that even for-profit organizations try to return those dollars back to their shareholders rather than necessarily creating something that's better than what might be in the public sector. So I think that it's too gross a generalization to say that they're better or worse. There's so many other factors in there. But when it comes to people management stuff, I would suggest it's simplistic, like trust, respect, and fairness.
So to cut to the chase on all of this, you've helped me understand it a lot better. Am I correct then in saying that there isn't a lot of difference between the public and private sector scores for similar sized organizations?
I would say that is correct.
And so we might consider ourselves still close to best in class for the size of organization that we are?
I'd have to do an analysis to say that with surety, but I would suggest that you're doing very well. I know that when I look at that many drivers and I see an overall average of 68.7, the very best in our database is 77, but I can tell you now that there's only a few that are up there. The vast majority of those that would be in front of the town of Oakville would be in the low 70s.
And those ones that are significantly higher are likely to be smaller
Yes.
organizations where everybody knows everybody.
Yes, and let me tell you, they have a disadvantage, and that is if anything goes wrong in those organizations, they go down very fast.
Or they go out of business.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Very witty. Councillor Elgar and then Councillor Knoll.
Yeah, thank you. It's actually, the question was along the same lines as Councillor Adams. My question would be, why are you comparing us to something that is not relevant, in my opinion, like 101 employees versus around 1,000, between 1,000 and 1,500? Wouldn't that be a better comparison when you're trying to show where we rank?
Yeah, and I mean, I won't say it's not useful. It does tell you what the absolute best is that we've ever seen. So it does give you that as a goal or as a hallmark, if you will. But to the degree that it's comparable, I would say no, it's not, and so you're better to look at the city or region best and the city or region average as the thing that you would look at or study in order to understand where the town of Oakville is. So I think it's a fair criticism, but it does tell you what is possible, or at least what we've got in our database as the highest possible result on those 29 drivers. So it's there for that reason.
Can you tell me the the company or whatever that is at 77%, how many employees they do have?
I think if I remember correctly, it's something like 120 or 140 if I'm remembering the right organization. But the ones that have done the very highest, they are small.
And I guess you did answer earlier when Councillor Khan asked about the weighting. So you absolutely didn't do any weighting at all. Everybody is equal, and that's why you could average averages and come up with an average,
Correct.
which normally doesn't work very well in anything.
Well, I mean, if you talk to academics about weighting, you can create a raging debate as to what you weight on and whether that weighting is correct or not. So you'd have to have a decision-making process about on what element would it be and is it merely importance. There's not a lot of variation in terms of how people see these things in terms of their importance, but there is some. And so to the degree that it's possible to score those things based on their importance, you could change all of the scores. But as soon as you get into this change mechanism, you add arithmetic issues, and at the same time, you make it much more difficult to understand what's there. These are the raw scores of each individual person, equally weighted and presented so that there's no debate other than the fact that it could be weighted rather than unweighted.
Take me back to the customer, the frontline customer service for a minute and show me where they were.
The first bar after the overall.
That to me is extremely impressive, and really should be highlighted. To me, the customer service, those are the frontline people dealing with the residents.
I can't tell you the items off the top of my head, but it's measuring how they see themselves being able to provide strong customer service. There's a bias, an inherent bias, because you're asking people about their ability to provide good service, so they might tend to rate that higher. But as soon as you look at it on a relative basis in any of the comparisons that we've got in the database, you'll see on a relative basis that the Town of Oakville staff respond quite positively to that item on a relative basis compared to other municipalities.
Thank you. It'll be interesting to see the next Polaro report to see how the two of them line up. I look forward to that too. Thank you.
At least on this one, those of us who remember Chris Bart's 5 to Survive, we have reason to at least smile. Councillor Knoll?
Thank you, Worship. Drilling into the same discussion you've just had with Councillors Adam and Elgar, the cohort that makes up the municipal regional group, where are they drawn from? Is it strictly Ontario, or how do you develop the cohort that you're benchmarking us against?
I think if I remember correctly, we have taken this now, we've actually winnowed it down. It is the most recent survey of somewhere in the vicinity of about 25 municipalities, I think all, but I may be wrong, there might be one or two that are outside of this province, and I would say the vast, vast majority are within 200 kilometres of Oakville.
Okay. And these, all of this data is correlated from data sets that based on your own surveys, or is there material purchased from other sources as well?
No, it's all from our own surveys.
Okay. The survey that was done for the Oakville Public Library, which is a similar survey to this, was that incorporated into these results? So are we seeing OPL results in this too?
Yes, you are. This is the aggregate of all of the departments within the town of Oakville.
The reason I asked is because the library really has a dotted line relationship to the town, so I wasn't sure if that was included. The reports to the departments, when you, in the staff report, you talk about the fact that the departments will be getting their individualized results. And you were saying that you have some nomenclature differences between municipalities, between departments and divisions, et cetera. When you say departments, what are you referring to? Is it going to be the commissions that you're referring to, or are you going to go down to the individual departments themselves? So would the fire chief be made aware of his department's results, specifically with the fire staff, et cetera?
We've purchased the reports that take us from commissions through the departments through to the managers. So we can actually boil right down across the organization.
That's awesome.
And we did that in 2010 and the survey, or 11 and the survey.
That's really excellent. The so those departments that have low result or low uptake in terms of the surveys, the department managers can speak to their respective units about that and try to find ways to rah-rah and try to get them to participate greater in the future?
That's correct. And one of the other things we're trying to do are pair those high performers up with those that are not as high performers so that they can get that synergy together as well.
That's great. Okay, thank you. Congratulations, everybody. It's a great report.
Thank you, Councillor Knoll. Councillor Giddings?
Thank you very much. Quick question in terms of the methodology. There are comments throughout talking about the municipal database. Is that database consistent in terms of municipalities from year to year?
Well, it would change if we have a new municipality come in, so therefore it's growing. We take out any previous results. So for instance, if we were in the city of Burlington and we were comparing to the municipal database, the 2010 result for Oakville would be taken out and the 2012 result would go in. So the database changes on that basis as well. The individual towns, counties, regional municipalities and municipalities, cities choose their own drivers. We guide them to have a core that's similar to what most other municipalities do. So there's an additional set of items or constructs that are added, and sometimes we don't have every municipality on every construct that might be compared to the town of Oakville. But I would suggest to you that the vast majority have 15 to 20 municipal comparisons from within Ontario, Southwest Ontario.
And so if I can call them buckets, the buckets would be similar in terms of across all the municipalities?
Yes.
Does your firm do the study for all of those municipalities?
Yes, we do.
All right, so there's consistency in terms of the data and the questions.
Let me just go one step further. We go further. When we look at the comparisons, we make sure that the items are the same. So if there was an item that we put in and we changed it for the town of Oakville, we would take it out in order to do the comparison so that it's truly apples to apples all the way in terms of the items themselves that go to make up the constructs.
I appreciate that. So we have the ability, or other municipalities have the ability to have proprietary questions?
Yes, they do.
If we have an area of concern or if we want to celebrate our success or whatever, we could do that?
Absolutely.
And the last question, the opportunities for advancement ranked fairly low.
Yes.
I didn't see, I believe our employee turnover was in the last study was 2.3. Do we have that number for this one? Just wondering if there's a correlation.
The turnover between 2010 and 2012, the number of employees who have left employment here, I don't have that answer.
Thank you, Councillor Giddings. Councillor Elgar for a second time.
Thank you. Thank you for the second time. It just, you're talking about the surveys are completely anonymous, and then I heard how they can really drill down, and I'm just wondering how you can really drill down when everything's 100% anonymous. How does that work?
Well, they're anonymous in terms of we don't know who responded, but they tell us which departments they're in, which divisions they're in, which units they're in, and if there's things like tenure and what have you, then what we've got is the ability to slice and dice. When we report back, there's a minimum number of people that we report back on, and so no unit below a certain number, and I can't remember what it is here for the town, it's usually 5, 7, or 10, don't get a report. And so we try to ensure that it's a group of people and it's the aggregate that's being presented.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Council, for your questions. Is there a mover and seconder to receive the information? Councillor Khan and Councillor Grant, thank you. Councillor Khan?
This is just a general question, and I just want, with what you do, we have at the town a very good relationship with our unions, and the mayor has done a lot to foster that, and so has Ray, Mr. Green has done that. But in certain industries, there's always an acrimonious relationship between, management and the labor group. Do you find that, is it your experience that in those industries that there's a lower response rate or there is a skewed result?
Yes. I would suggest that when there's any form of acrimony, that it causes people to decide not to fill out a survey, sometimes because they don't care about it, but also because they want to say to management in another way, I don't care, or I'm not going to fill out your survey, especially where we see labour strife or issues that in particular that have been long-standing that haven't been addressed. Shows up time and time again, for instance, in fire service, where we see in particular in some municipalities where there's a great deal of acrimony, very low response rates.
Thank you, Councillor Khan. We have a motion moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed, if any, and the motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Yardley. We now turn to item number 3, which is the motion introduced by Councillor Johnston and seconded by Councillor Elgar at the March 25th council meeting concerning the collection of development charges for the expansion and improvements to hospitals. Councillor Johnston.
Thank you, Mayor. I think it's time once again that we let the province know that we need a newer, bigger hospital because of growth. And I don't feel it's fair that the existing tax base should pay for growth. So this is just reinforcing all our other motions along the same lines in the past. And I'd like everyone's support.
Thank you, Councillor Johnston. Councillor Elgar?
Councillor Johnston has covered exactly what we're trying to do here.
All right. Then, is there other discussion? Councillor Robinson?
Your Worship, thank you. Yes, I'd like to speak to this. I think it's certainly an appropriate gesture, maybe even long overdue, but I need to tell council that within the past reasonably few weeks, I've talked to our staff about options and ways that they might be able to find other DC money, in particularly for use for waterfront and harbor management. And they kept assuring me that they have continued to research the legislation and that there really isn't any way they can see anything more happening. Based on my continued perseverance, I had a meeting on Friday with MPP Kevin Flynn, who is totally aware of this notice of motion that we're going to vote on and pass in a moment, I presume. However, he is very supportive of his becoming involved in a provincial initiative and talking to two ministries, Municipal Affairs and Finance, in an effort to see if they can extrapolate or change any provincial legislation to allow us to get our hands on some DC money for harbor maintenance and management, all brought about, Your Worship, by the development of residential properties to the north, as we know, which causes the siltation to happen and things like this. And Kevin was quite supportive of his becoming involved and looking into this with his own people in Queen's Park. So I just want to tell you that I've had these conversations and I certainly support this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Robinson. Any other speakers? A recorded vote has been called. If there are no other speakers, I will put the vote. Please rise to be named to record your support for the motion. Councillor Khan, Councillor Adams, Councillor Grant, Councillor Knoll, Councillor Lapworth, Councillor Elgar, Mayor Burton, Councillor Giddings, Councillor Bird, Councillor DeMoff, Councillor Duddock, Councillor Robinson, and Councillor Johnston. The motion carries. That brings us to the report from my office to you. Item number 4, the Province of Ontario 2013 Senior of the Year Award. Councillor Robinson.
I'll give you a motion, Your Worship.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Councillor Khan, thank you. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed, if any? The report is adopted. That brings us to, there is no confidential discussion item, and you have your information items circulated electronically, and you have your status of outstanding issue report. And we have 2 items of new business that I'm aware of. One is, we have 2 notices of motion, one considering Metrolinx, one considering the Ontario Municipal Board, and one concerning the Greater Toronto Airport Authority. So we have 3. Council, I would suggest to you that these matters, if you were willing to waive the procedure bylaw, would be appropriate to deal with tonight. Councillor Adams.
I'd gladly do that, particularly with the Metrolinx one being very time sensitive.
Seconder, Councillor Johnston. All right, the motion before you is to waive the procedure bylaw for these 3 matters. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That is carried. Let's take them up in a sort of alphabetical order. Let's start with the Airport Authority. Councillor Knoll.
Thank you, Worship. All of us around the table, I think from time to time we realize that our biggest issue, probably coming through the phones and emails, is traffic. Well, this is a whole new kind of traffic that we in North Oakville are dealing with on a larger basis, and it's air traffic. Over the last year or so, since the Transport Canada approved changes to the air lanes for Lester B. Pearson Airport, residents in North Oakville have experienced increased amounts of air traffic noise as a result of airplanes on their final approach to Toronto Pearson Airport over our community. It has gone from, for this councillor, it has gone from being in the grouping of top 10 issues to being the #1 issue that I deal with now. It's something that I personally am experiencing as well, living where I live in the Uptown Core community. It is troubling as a councillor, and I would imagine for all of us who've had to deal with this, that when our constituents call, we can simply say, sorry, we can't really help you. And that's just generally not good enough. And I think that what we would like to do, Councillor Grant and I spoke about this, and something we would like to be able to do is to draw some awareness, first of all, to the issue, facilitate an opportunity to actually have a public meeting so that people will have a chance to speak to the people in charge and understand some of the issues around air traffic and its increase in frequency over Oakville. The other thing that our motion talks about is the fact that we believe that the planning department might need to consider at some point in the near future some kind of warning clauses, as are done in other municipalities, to make sure that residents, new residents, particularly in North Oakville, are aware that this is happening before they buy and start ringing the phone, because frankly that is my #1 neighborhood I'm getting my calls from, is the new residences across from the 16 Mile Creek Recreation Center. That is where the majority of my complaints are coming from, and then down the corridor into the Neagawa community as well. So our resolution also asks that the planning department consider that and report back. We also want to make sure that in quickly going over the town's website, there is no specific mention of it. If you do Google, I don't know if we use Google Engine, but if you do search on the town's website for air traffic noise, you get one of two articles, either the one that was authored by Councillor Grant and I, or by Councillors Khan and Adams, which is great, but it would be wonderful to have something a little more centralized with links to the GTAA, Lester B. Pearson Airport, and Transport Canada, so that residents can have a more ready opportunity to be able to communicate. So our resolution has been presented. Do you want me to actually read the resolution of the record, Your Worship? Or?
Yes, please.
Okay, so the resolution, or the suggested motion goes as follows. Whereas revised flight paths to Pearson Airport are placing more air traffic in the corridor above Northern Oakville, whereas the increased air traffic from aircraft on approach to land has resulted in greater noise pollution in the airspace in Northern Oakville, whereas the town of Oakville has no authority over the federal government or the GTAA, Greater Toronto, it's actually Greater Toronto Airport Authority, there's a typo there, to effectively mitigate problems resulting from increased noise pollution. Therefore, be it resolved, the public information being facilitated as soon as practical to include representatives of the GTAA, Transport Canada, and Oakville members of Parliament to provide affected residents information as to the air traffic changes that have caused the recent increases of aircraft noise. And here's the key factor, or one of the key points I want to really emphasize here, the potential for additional noise in the future, and because as air traffic expands and as that airport expands, which is great economically, they're going to have to fly somewhere. So how is that going to impact us? We need to know those questions, those answers. And protocols for reporting and or commenting on concerns and local impacts. That information be added to the town's website about aircraft noise issues, along with links to the Aircraft Noise Management Office of the Greater Toronto Airport Authority, Transport Canada, and offices of the members of Provincial Parliament responsible for Oakville ridings. That Service Oakville staff be provided with information and contact numbers to direct resident concerns to the proper authorities who have jurisdiction on air traffic. That staff report back on the potential need to require warning clauses be inserted in buyer's agreements for upcoming developments in North Oakville or elsewhere that would be affected by increased aircraft noise. That is seconded by my colleague, Councillor Grant.
Thank you, Councillor, and I appreciate the note you made. I have come to believe that the GTAA will be allowing flights later and later and earlier, and we're going to have more and more trouble over it.
Yeah,
Councillor-
absolutely, especially since they don't seem to be going ahead with their eastern expansion that was originally contemplated, and it seems that all the traffic that 30 or 40 years ago was contemplated to be split across the GTAA is all going to be centered in that particular airport, which is just going to increase the problems that we're experiencing now.
It's going to be nice. Councillor Robinson and then Councillor Elgar.
Thank you, Your Worship. First of all, I'd like to congratulate the two councillors for bringing forth this motion. As I said about the other one, I think this is long overdue too, but a little bit of history to start with, Your Worship, is quite a number of years ago, the town of Oakville had a similar problem over northeast Oakville. I guess that would be Ward 6. And a meeting was held, a public meeting was held in Oakville. The people from the ministry and the airport group came out here. We had a public meeting, and it didn't do one bit of good. So I certainly hope that that this initiative will have a greater impact. Now, I'd just like to point out, Your Worship, that I've been involved with some constituents out in southwest Oakville, and I'll just tell you a bit about that. I was found out that about a year ago, that group from the airport did submit a report to the region of Halton. So some of you councillors that are on the Halton regional government will probably be remembering that. And I've been talking to a fellow by the name of Aleem Kanji, who's with the Aircraft Noise Management Office of the Greater Toronto Airport Authority. And he had a meeting and some constituents in southwest Oakville. And this Aleem person had a meeting set up with Terrence Young, MP Terrence Young, a while ago. And I was invited to attend and come to that meeting. And I asked if I could bring the constituent with me that I'd been talking to from time to time about this, and that request was denied. So I didn't go to that meeting, but I have a meeting set up with Mr. Kanji and the constituents on April 26 at his office up on Convair Road, I think it is, or something like that. And I'm going to go ahead and keep that meeting, and maybe if I get anything interesting coming out of it, I'll come back and mention it to you. But I thank you for bringing this motion forward sooner than later, and I'm certainly pleased to be able to support it.
Thank you, Councillor Robinson.
Oh, excuse me. Could you include in there councillors at the top and southwest Oakville?
That's more than a friendly amendment, that's fine.
Yeah. Thanks.
Councillor Adams. I think I saw a hand.
So first of all, Councillor Robinson, thank you for representing the Northeast Oakville residents as well. We appreciate that.
Well, I didn't know I did. I represented the town of Oakville as a councillor.
I know. So in addition, thank you to our Ward 5 colleagues for bringing this forward. We've also had the same kind of discussion at the region, and just as a word for our staff, when you're looking at the website additions, the region of Halton also has similar material, and it would be useful to coordinate the content between the region and the town. So again, thank you very much. It is an issue all the way across, and I suppose it is true that because you've got the first developments on the north side of Dundas, you're going to be the first ones to feel it, and that's been something I've been worried about as well as we develop north of Dundas.
Good.
Yeah, be afraid, be very afraid.
Thank you. I think, Councillor Adams. Just a technical assistance here. Can we get that microphone boosted? I can't hear the councillor.
Do I need to pump up the volume? Is that what you're complaining about, sir?
Well, there's actually not enough presence on your mic either. So between the two things, I'd be happy. And of course, now you won't speak again, so it'll all be pointless anyway, right? Okay. All right. Lordy, I lost track. Who's next? Councillor Elgar.
Thank you. I strongly support the motion of what the intent is. I'm not sure we're going to have any better result than what Councillor Robinson mentioned a few years ago, but I think we have to keep trying. And in the meantime, the mayor's office actually has a form letter which redirects people to the proper authority, which has got all the different links on it, which is worth sending. I know Councillor Lapworth and I have this, it's the same issue, and it's percolating up everywhere, and it's not getting prettier, it's getting earlier in the morning all the time also. So it's waking people up, and I'm not sure whether we're going to have any impact, but we definitely have to get to the MPs. Thank you.
Well, it's a little bit like Gretzky and goals. The only goal you absolutely can't get is a shot you don't take, so we got to say something. Now, for the benefit of the public and to clarify for council, in the first two lines of this resolution, we're striking the word northern, so it just says above Oakville. All right? If you'd use your microphone, I would know what you're saying.
Absolutely, sorry. In the last paragraph as well, where it says upcoming developments in North Oakville, we could probably just strike the
Thank you
north.
very much. In three places, we're striking the word north, I think. Councillor Knoll.
Just the one typo as well in the third whereas, Greater
Yes,
Toronto Transportation should be Greater Toronto Airport Authority.
Yes, the clerk noted that.
If we're going to
Councillor
talk about
Adams?
typos, therefore was spelled wrong as well.
Just to make sure that we got it all, in the last one, which Councillor Grant noted that we need to take out developments in North Oakville, you need to take out the word north, or elsewhere is probably redundant.
All right, so if we're striking the words or elsewhere, having struck north? Excellent. Now, just to add clarity to this, would you like a recorded vote on these resolutions tonight?
Let's get exercise.
Okay, exercise is requested, exercise will be provided. To be recorded in favor of this vote, please rise to be named. Councillor Khan, Councillor Adams, Councillor Grant, Councillor Knoll, Councillor Lapworth, Councillor Elgar, Mayor Burton, Councillor Giddings, Councillor Byrd, Councillor DeMoff, Councillor Duddick, Councillor Robinson, and Councillor Johnston. Thank you. The motion carries. Let's turn now to the Metrolinx item. And turning to that, let's turn to Councillor Adams.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I appreciate the indulgence of council in allowing this to be brought forward tonight for consideration. Last Wednesday at Planning Public Works, we considered a report regarding the Metrolinx funding and Metrolinx projects and their impact on not only Halton, but all of the local municipalities. And you may have read reports describing the number of projects and the number of projects that are either delayed or being, in effect, canceled in the current funding envelope. And you'll also, I'm sure, have heard some of the discussion around new funding tools that are being considered for funding the various projects. The region of Halton has prepared a report. The committee considered it last Wednesday and has passed a recommendation for regional council consideration this coming Wednesday. And I thought it quite important for the town of Oakville Council to consider that report and its recommendations in advance of the regional Halton council considering it, so that we may influence that as well as the ultimate Metrolinx decisioning and process. So the motion that I would like us to pass is one that supports the recommendation from Planning Public Works. It reads that the recommendation of Region of Halton Planning Public Works Committee approved at its meeting on April 10th, 2013 regarding PW 19-13 Metrolinx Regional Transportation Plan, the Big Move update, be endorsed and the Region of Halton be advised accordingly, and that the Region of Halton be requested to advise Metrolinx, the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing, the Ministry of Infrastructure, and the Ministry of Transportation of the Town of Oakville's support of this resolution upon approval of the recommendation by Region of Halton Council. The recommendation is also attached in the materials provided to you. I've also had our Clerk's Department provide you with the staff presentation that was provided this past Wednesday, which if you walk through it, you'll note first of all, the number of projects that are now missing out of the original set, and you'll note that a number of them are Halton projects, and in particular, a lot of the GO train and rail projects that are now pushed out from where they were originally. And further, we have the ongoing issue around what the funding tools are and whether property taxes are an appropriate mechanism for funding these various projects. And it's the Region of Halton's position that it's not appropriate, in as much as we're looking for funding for these projects that funds growth through the cost of growth, or the growth creators paying for it, and the use of property taxes doesn't support that. So the recommendations of the committee that we would be supporting by our own motion here tonight is that the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing be advised that as a result of the delay in the implementation of the Halton projects within the Metrolinx Regional Transportation Plan, the Big Move, in particular all-day service to Milton and Georgetown and electrification of the GO Lakeshore line through Halton, Halton will be unable to meet the forecasts and targets of the Provincial Growth Plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe. 2, that Metrolinx be requested to ensure that the investment strategy is coordinated with the forecasts, targets, and policies of the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe and provides a sustainable strategy for the funding of all 62 projects identified in the Big Move capital program, including those projects directly benefiting Halton, and if this is not achievable, that the province be requested to revisit the growth plan assumptions to reflect the existing economic realities and a slower growth scenario. 3, that Metrolinx be advised that the region strongly opposes the use of any investment tools that impact property taxes to fund the Big Move. 4, that the regional clerk forward a copy of the report number PW 1913 regarding Metrolinx Regional Transportation Plan, the Big Move update to the City of Burlington, the Town of Halton Hills, the Town of Milton, the Town of Oakville, the Premier of Ontario, the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, the Minister of Infrastructure, the Minister of Finance, Halton MPPs, and Metrolinx for their information. And finally, 5, that representatives from Metrolinx, the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing, the Ministry of Infrastructure, and the Ministry of Transportation be invited to give presentations to the Planning and Public Works Committee to address transportation projects proposed for Halton in the Big Move and to address growth. Now, you'll note that one of the elements here is to note that without these projects going forward in the timeframes being expected, we'll be unable to meet the growth forecasts that are being expected of Halton. And it's an important element to understand because all of our transportation master planning that we've done has expected and assumed that these projects go forward. So at this point, these projects are being pulled away from Halton and from the local municipalities, and that's going to make it very difficult for us to deal with our transportation planning over the next 2 decades. So I really hope that every member of this council supports this motion. It's a very important motion for Oakville as well as for all of Halton. Thank you very much for your time tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. Councillor Elgar as the seconder is next, and I have a speakers list building. Councillor Demoff is first. Councillor Elgar.
I strongly support this motion. I hope everyone on this council will. Just a little bit of a background on the motion and why it is so important is that the regional official plan, which was placed on a growth factor, the fundamental transportation issue was the modal split going forward. And for those in TV land who don't know what the modal split is, it's about public transit versus the personal car. Halton Region has a current public use of 5% overall, and the rest of the people are traveling by car. When the region's official plan was completed, the last one, they used a 20% modal split. If you look in the rearview mirror, Halton Region has been stuck at about 5% for the last 30 years, even though they kept creeping it up from 10%. They were going to go to 15%, and then they bumped it to 20% based on the Big Move, which is the $50 billion, $2 billion a year project for 25 years. And right now, it is basically being gutted because of the lack of funds, especially in Halton Region and the western part of the greater GTA and Hamilton area. So this is critical because unless something happens, and if we are forced to continue to grow, our time getting to work will increase exponentially as the bottlenecks become bigger and bigger, and there are already issues. So right now this motion is saying we won't be growing unless we get some relief and actually the funding is put back, because an awful lot of things now have been bumped from the 15 within the 15-year plan. They've been tossed over to be 25-year plan. So I don't know if you figure you're going to be around for the next 30 or 40 years, that may be good, but it's not very good for the working people right now. So I hope everyone will support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Elgar. Councillor Demoff.
I actually had a couple of questions. One of them, though, and I guess it's more of a procedural one, why wouldn't we deal with this after Regional Council has approved the recommendation? I have a little problem, or I have a problem with us supporting a resolution that it could be changed at Halton Regional Council. So I'm just wondering why I hadn't had an opportunity to see this when we voted on it, but why we're dealing with this before Halton Region deals with it. It would make sense to me to let them pass it, and then we would pass one in support of what they've done.
In part so that we can help lead the region's direction on it. Second, the Planning Public Works Committee dealt with it at great length. I don't expect any significant change to it. And third, our next opportunity won't be for some time, and for us to be able to have an influence on Metrolinx really means that we should be doing it sooner rather than later.
But this Metrolinx is not going to be decided within 3 weeks. But can we, maybe our clerk can say, can we approve a resolution that's not already approved at Regional Council?
Yes, Councillor. In fact, this is a fairly normal maneuver from the lower tier councils with respect to really big statements at the regional council. It's not unknown to begin something at the committee there and then have the support of the local councils brought to the floor of the regional council meeting. If you look at the way the councillor has carefully worded it, he's saying that we support the recommendation of PPW. He's not saying we support the resolution, some hypothetical resolution. So this is intended to give extra weight and importance to the matter when it hits the floor next Wednesday.
But he does say we support the resolution. He says we support this resolution upon approval. So if that resolution changes, I'm just...
Our position is that we're supporting the recommendation of Planning and Public Works, which is already done.
Can we not just say that then?
That's what we are saying.
The next item that you're highlighting, this is more a question of the communication of the result. And in the unlikely event that this resolution is not approved by the region, then that would not happen. But that's perfectly logical, and I think totally consistent with your caution. If the region doesn't pass it, then it's not. Then notice of our support will not be forwarded. So it's a perfect result.
Okay. My second question is, not having read the report that you refer to here. How much money does the region of Halton put into transit?
We don't fund the transit's all at the local level, but the transportation capital program includes significant capital from the region.
But it's the only region that doesn't fund transit, right? So they're the ones that are, it seems a little hypocritical to me that they're coming out with this.
When the region did its transportation master plan, it did it in concert with the local municipalities and discussion around what the local transit planning would require. So it's...
I think there's a small correction. Peel does not do transit, and Halton does not do transit. Durham and York do transit.
If I'm not mistaken, though, Peel funds the caravan program, do they not?
I have no idea. I wouldn't. This is about a multi-billion-dollar provincial transportation infrastructure plan where Halton's growth was contingent on that being delivered. And what's being discovered is that Metrolinx has now pulled the rug out from under that by taking that multi-billion-dollar transportation infrastructure out of the current time frame and putting it out into the 25-year time frame. And we're trying to record for the province's edification our dismay at this change. The town manager, Mr. Green.
Through you, Mayor Burton, excuse me, one of the key issues for the region of Halton, of course, they do have the majority of the major roads throughout Halton, and in fact, the transportation planning is based on this rather high modal split, and if in fact that modal split does not occur because the infrastructure is not there to deliver the high-level transit, it could have a major impact on the region's road network. So that's why the region has jumped in at this time, not as much for transit from their own point of view delivering service. That is delivered locally right now. It is rather its impact on the major road network.
Okay, it's not that I disagree with what's here, it's just, this just came to us tonight with no information, so it would be nice if we could get this information. If this was done last week, it would have been nice to get some information before 7 o'clock tonight when we're dealing with something like this, but thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bird.
Just a comment, I support the motion. Looking at their 5 and 25-year plan, this is from Metrolux, the big move, what we're talking about. It strikes me under every scenario that it ends up being very Toronto-centric. Most of the roads come and go, and I know the reason I stand to say that, so for the next 25 years, it indicated that property taxes shouldn't be a funding source. Well, maybe it should. And Toronto Centre, I just want to point out, as most of you know, and these are 2012 figures to say here, development charges, which we just got good news that ours are going up. In 2012, the residential detached unit in Toronto was $17,441. In Oakville, it was $50,176. Now that's development charges. Interesting enough, for non-residential, Toronto was 58 cents per square foot. In Oakville, it was $17.35. I'm just saying, maybe property taxes, I would make a motion that we don't even consider it to Toronto move their percentage per $100,000 to the average of everybody else in the GST or the GTA. There's a tremendous source of, I don't say tax, strikes me tax room in the property tax and development charges within the city of Toronto. If we're all in this together, if we look at this map putting these roads, because they seem to connect but lead to, a lot of them lead to downtown Toronto. Why, and I can't figure those out at Queen's Park, do they always continue to believe that a taxpayer in a $500,000 house in Toronto is less able to pay taxes than anywhere else in the province of Ontario? If you can explain it to me, why we can't look at that other than 24 MPPs, I think, from Toronto, but it just seems to be hands off. Yet, you get elected from Mayor of Toronto, going down there and stopping the gravy train. I can't understand it, and I think that before we say no property tax, we should look for property tax fairness. Even if they want to put a surcharge just on roads. I have no problem paying fair share, but it strikes me there's an inequity that has to be addressed, and I know, Your Worship, you've talked about this to representatives of Toronto, and I think you've also been on CBC, and I encourage you to continue the effort. I think you're on to something.
Thank you, Councillor Bird. Other speakers? Councillor Elgar, are you satisfied? All right. To be recorded in favor of this motion, please rise to be named. Councillor Khan, Councillor Adams, Councillor Grant, Councillor Knoll, Councillor Lapworth, Councillor Elgar, Mayor Burton, Councillor Giddings, Councillor Bird, Councillor DeMoff, Councillor Duddick, Councillor Robinson, and Councillor Johnston. The motion is carried. Council, let's turn now to the Ontario Municipal Board and direct our attention to Councillor Johnston.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you to Council for hearing this item tonight, because the member, Frank Clee's private member's bill was having second reading on Thursday, so it is important that we send a message tonight so that he has it before he stands. And basically there's a lot of words there, but what it boils down to is that if a municipality has an official plan that's sanctioned by the province, then their word should be final when on any matter where a developer brings a motion to change the official plan and the zoning. And would you like me to read the whole thing into the record? I'm hearing no.
It's being written, it is in the record. Councillor Lapworth.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Johnson has done a great job in wording this, and the support that I have is that this is just one more notch for us to make Oakville the most livable town in Canada. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lapworth. Any other discussion? Shall I put the vote? Yes, sir. All right. To be recorded in favor of this motion, please rise to be named. Councillor Johnston. Councillor Robinson, Councillor Duddick, Councillor Demoff, Councillor Byrd, Councillor Giddings, Mayor Burton, Councillor Elgar, Councillor Lapworth, Councillor Knoll, Councillor Grant, Councillor Adams, and Councillor Khan. Just to change it up. I declare the motion carried. All right, Council, that brings us to regional reports and question period regarding town boards and advisory committees.
You actually have Councillor Giddings wants to make congratulations.
Oh, excuse me. Councillor Giddings, we are still in new business. I understand you have some congratulations.
I do. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. We even have some pictures to go along with it. I would like to congratulate all of Oakville's FIRST robotics teams for their recent involvement and successes at the recent FIRST robotics competition at the Hershey Center in Mississauga. As you know, Mayor Burton has proclaimed Oakville as a FIRST community. FIRST robotics competition is an international competition for high school students. Their mission is to inspire Canadian high school and elementary school students to pursue further studies and careers in science, technology, and engineering. Each year a new challenge is presented detailing the functions that the robot must perform. Teams have only 6 weeks to design, build, and test a robot prior to competition. Awards are given for the playing field competition winners, best design, engineering inspiration, and other fields important to the FIRST experience. The core belief of FIRST robotics is gracious professionalism, that competition is not for the sake of destroying one another, but for the sake of bettering and improving both competitors as a result of the competition. Team 1334 earned the prestigious Engineering Inspiration Award, which celebrates outstanding success in advancing respect and appreciation for engineering and engineers. Team 1334 also won the Imagery Award, and team member Sam Thompson won the Dean's List Finalist Award. Krista Peralto from Holy Trinity was recognized as a Dean's List finalist, and St. Mildred's earned many prestigious awards. The Woody Flowers Award was won by Ms. Sarah Sills, and student Ankita Sharma was a Dean's List finalist. St. Mildred School also earned the Regional Chairman's Award. St. Mildred's and OTHS also attended a regional competition in Calgary last weekend. We are incredibly proud of our students as OTHS won the entire competition. I would like to thank the youth from Oakville Trafalgar High School, St. Mildred's, Holy Trinity, King's Christian College, White Oaks Secondary, and Appleby College, as well as the efforts of their mentors and sponsors that give countless hours and support to the FIRST program. You are all to be congratulated for your gracious professionalism. You continue to make Oakville proud.
Councillor Giddings, that's outstanding. Thank you very much for that. Now, Council, I'll call again for regional reports and question period regarding town boards and advisory committees, and I'll take you now to requests for reports. We have 2 that I know of. Councillor Giddings.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Further to Council's April 8th Planning and Development meeting, where the future use of the former Lynbrook School property was deferred. This request for report asks that staff, the first paragraph is slightly different than what was handed out earlier, my apologies. That staff report to Council on what terms might be considered for a private school use on the former Lynbrook Public School site on Lynbrook Road, especially with regard, but not limited to, traffic controls for motor vehicles, pedestrians, and crossings, leasing advantages versus ownership, length of any lease and subleasing clause, heritage protection, enrollment capping of schools on Lynbrook Road, expansion limits, hours of operation, activities and types of operation, noise control, residential uses, enforcing the promises from St. Mildred's Lightburn School, public access to school lands to be clarified, improvements to property responsibility of the leasee, making improvements, changes subject to site plan control and town approval, financial considerations such as leasing fees, etc. I realize it's a lengthy list, however, the staff recommendation that came to us on April 8th was deferred, and this is a different use that was in the staff recommendation, so we felt it important that it be very comprehensive. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Giddings. Councillor Bird, I understand you're seconding this.
Yes, I think everyone understands the issue and the very site-specific limitations to this property, given the nature of the surrounding area, especially a school that is 4 times, I guess, the enrollment, 3 or 4 times the enrollment across the street. So what we wanted to do is hold up some sort of a template that we can examine use on the site as being proposed to make sure that, in fact, from a good planning point of view, it'll actually work going forward. It may be nice, but may not work going forward. So before we reinstitute a use in that site, given an as-built nature of the surrounding areas, we want to make sure that we have some of those questions that are being asked of us because of what has been handed out at the door.
Thank you, Councillor Bird. I'll call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? The report is approved. The next request for report concerns ways to increase the success of our business districts. Councillor Dudek.
Thank you, Your Worship. Before I do my request for report, I believe Councillor Demoff had a congratulatory note that she wanted to share, so in deference to her, I will hand it back to her.
Councillor Demoff, let's go back up to new business for a second. I'm very sorry.
That's okay. I won't be long, but the playoff season is about to start. And as everyone knows, Oakville is home to the only team at this point that we know is in the playoffs, the Toronto Rock, 6-time National League lacrosse champions. So as they start their quest for their 7th championship, I would invite the rest of council to join me in sending good wishes their way. I couldn't wear my jersey, but I do have my Toronto Rock logo on my phone, so let's all wish them luck in the playoffs.
Thank you very much. We will.
And on that note, request.
Councillor Demoff, do they bring home what do they bring home when they win?
They bring home the Champions Cup, and actually on that note, I would invite you all to join me at the Air Canada Centre April 28th at 3 o'clock for the first playoff game. It's called the Champions Cup.
Thank you very much. Councillor Dudek.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have a request for a report that staff report on best practices and options for council's consideration to increase efficiency, effectiveness, and success of our local business improvement areas to assist in strengthening the Oakville economy, and that's moved by myself and seconded by my colleague, Councillor Robinson, who represents the Bronte BIA. And I know that we have great partnerships with the respective BIAs currently, but I think we have other options that we might consider in regards to broadening our partnership and realizing efficiencies as a result, which in turn will help our local economy and, more important, our businesses.
Thank you, Councillor Dudek. Councillor Robinson? Thank you.
You don't have to stand.
All right, then I'll put the vote. All those in favor of the request? Opposed, if any? The request is approved. All right. That completes the main business in our agenda. That brings us to consideration of reading of the bylaws. Councillor Adams?
Just on the issue of the request for reports, at the last planning and development meeting, I brought up an issue regarding Invicta Drive, and at that time I said that I was looking at bringing forward a request for report. Councillor Khan and I met with our planning director today, and we're satisfied in as much as she's intending to bring forward a memo for our use on the subject of the compatibility of uses in the Invicta Drive area. So this is me saying I don't need to ask for anything, but I did bring it up before, so I wanted you to know where it went.
Well, thank you for dotting the I, or is it the T, and crossing the I or the T? Anyway, thank you very much for that. If I could find a mover and seconder for consideration and reading of the bylaws, Councillor Grant and Councillor Elgar. This is authority for bylaw 2013-05, 032, 033, 035, and 040 as printed in the agenda. Any changes by the clerk? No. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? The bylaws are adopted. That completes our agenda. Thank you very much for your time and attention. It's been great working with you, and we are adjourned.